Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm Jim Goddard. Best of the season, John.
Best to you too, Jim.
John, Cleantech Holdings made its debut on the TSX today. Is the Cobalt rose still blooming?
Well, in the last few weeks, it seemed like Cobalt companies were selling off. Cleantech, which had been in the $1.60, $1.80 range, had dropped down as low as $1.16 on the ASX. But last night it had a strong day, up sharply, and it's up a little bit more today on the TSX. But volume is still quite weak on the TSX. North Americans need to get used to it, and then they need to figure out, too, which is it going to be, the North American market or the Australian market that drives the price. In reality, what we're getting here is almost 24-hour trading because the Australian market does not overlap with the North American market. So traders can simply switch from Australia to North America, to the TSX, if they want to trade the nickel-cobalt story. Now, the arrival of Cleantech on the TSX is important because this makes this nickel-cobalt supply story more available to North American institutions. Once you're listed on the TSX, you have to become a 43-101 filer. In Australia, when you publish a feasibility study or pre-feasibility study, it consists of some 30-page news release, which usually doesn't have the devils that you find in the details of a technical report filed for a Canadian listing. So the company just filed a technical report for its pre-feasibility study, which it had done last year after it had published a definitive feasibility study for the Scandium portion of the Syerston project, which has been now renamed the Sunrise project. They hope to have a feasibility study done in the first half of next year. By having these technical reports available, now a broader audience that likes to do detailed analysis can take a look at the underlying numbers. They've already got some parties lined up to do 50 to 65% debt financing of the sort of what's probably going to be $1 billion capex project, and they hope to raise the other portion for equity. Now, Cobalt itself is still ramping up. In fact, it was up to $35, $36 this week. Last week, Cobalt 27, which is the sort of stockpiling company created by Pala Investments, it raised $85 million for a bought deal and went out there and bought 700 tons at a premium price of 36 to the market that it had optioned. So Cobalt is showing that sort of exponential uptrend, but there have been media articles that are starting to warn that the bloom may soon go off both the Cobalt and the Lithium rose. Financial Times, for example, had an article pointing out that more lithium-ion batteries have been produced than are required for the electric vehicle market next year. So there may be a stalling in temporary demand. But then on the other hand, there's still this problem that Volkswagen wanted to nail down a 5-year supply at a fixed price, and none of the producers wanted to agree to this. So the electric vehicle makers realized that they have a cobalt problem. Glencore looks at it from a slightly different point of view. It's ready to turn on production from Katanga next year, which will enable it to add a significant new supply of cobalt. Katanga's project is, of course, in the Congo, which provides about 65% of the world's cobalt supply, and with Kabila refusing to step down as president and the country's underlying corruption and stability problems, there's a lot of concern about where long-term cobalt supply is going to come from, which is why all the end users who make these lithium-ion batteries, they're all looking for thrifting out of the cobalt, which is part of the cathode. And they've managed to reduce the cobalt content more relative to the nickel component, which is why CleanTech Sunrise project is interesting. They have a flow sheet that will produce nickel cobalt sulfate, which is the higher grade material needed for this battery market. But it may not happen tomorrow, but very soon the cobalt rose is going to stop blooming. An important announcement that was probably overlooked by most is that Toyota is teaming up with Panasonic to develop a solid-state battery. Now, Toyota has been kind of behind the curve with electric vehicles because it's focused on hydrogen fuel cell technology. It has been working on a magnesium-ion battery. The magnesium-ion battery is the holy grail for the battery sector because it does not have the problem of exploding or combusting that lithium has. Everybody would like to get away. It is actually quite rare that lithium does explode. But in these batteries, if there's a breach between the anode and the cathode, and the separator gets in any way it shorts and it gets exposed, it is flammable. It's a reason that airlines are banning these new smart luggages from being checked unless you remove the battery, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of having smart luggage that you can track down after the airline has lost it. It's also a reason nobody really wants laptops stowed, checked with their luggage, the way the United States wanted to insist on to prevent laptops from serving as terrorist bombs. But there was several weeks ago, there was a very interesting announcement of a breakthrough involving the magnesium-ion battery. Now, the Toyota has been focused on a liquid electrolyte. Lithium-ion batteries also involve a liquid electrolyte, but the problem with the magnesium-ion battery is that the electrolyte that works well tends to be, for the magnesium battery, tends to be very corrosive and unsafe to use, whereas safer alternatives, the magnesium ions, don't travel as much, and there's buildup on the cathode, which further slows down, degrades the battery. So Toyota's been kind of stuck trying to come up with a solution to deal with this. Well, a group of scientists demonstrated that a different type of electrolyte made of magnesium, scandium, and selenium was very effective at avoiding these problems, and this is a solid. So the possibility of a solid-state magnesium-ion battery is a very important development. It will probably take another 5-7 years to commercialize it, but the magnesium-ion battery, which does not require any cobalt, it would be the Death Star for the lithium-ion battery, and it would certainly take the bloom off the cobalt rose. Now, anybody paying close attention would realize that there's twice as much scandium required as magnesium in this electrolyte, and given that scandium is supposed to cost $2,000 a kilo, it's hard to imagine that this could be commercialized. But the paper that the scientists put out indicated that indium and yttrium were also candidates in this electrolyte in place of scandium, but they weren't quite as effective. But we know that scandium and yttrium work very well together. For example, Bloom Energy's solid fuel cell, the Bloom box, originally its electrolyte was a ceramic based on yttrium, but the problem was it operated too hot, and there would be this degradation of the fuel cell and constant repair headaches, which is why even though the solid fuel cell was invented in the 40s, it has never been commercialized until the Bloom Energy Group developed a solution for a Mars space probe for NASA, and saw that by doping the electrolyte with scandium, they could reduce the operating temperature to a level where the degradation of the battery of the technology did not take place. So quite likely what's going to happen next in commercializing this magnesium ion solid state battery is to perhaps marry scandium and yttrium. And yttrium is a rare earth that only costs $10-20 a kilo. It's one of the heavy rare earths. It's had a slump because its main applications have been displaced by new lighting technologies, and but it's considerably more abundant. So it's possible that a scandium doped yttrium magnesium ion battery sits in the future, and this would certainly not be good news for cobalt operations. But since cleantech has also the world's richest scandium deposit, down the road when this comes in, this will be what cleantech ends up becoming a baseload supplier for the future magnesium ion battery.
Discovery Watch with John Kaiser will be right back after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork will commence later this year. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Novo Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, does the arrival of cleantech on the TSX have any implications for Scandium International, which also trades on the Toronto Exchange?
Well, there are several positive implications for Scandium International, which already has a permit to build a scandium mine at the Ningen site in New South Wales, and is now essentially waiting to raise $100 million to build this project. The company started off. The company has been busy trying to secure offtake agreements, which is something that cleantech also was busy with until sort of last year, after it published its own feasibility study for its Sunrise Scandium only plant, decided to switch to the nickel cobalt story, because the nickel cobalt market is much deeper. So the scandium market's very small. It still needs to be developed. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, cobalt production comes, 2/3 from the Congo, where Robert Friedland's other company, Ivanhoe Mines, has made the world's or Africa's richest and biggest copper discovery, the Kamoa-Kakula deposit. Now, quite interestingly, although the Kamoa-Kakula deposit is not far from Kolwezi, which is a copper-cobalt former mine that is controlled by Glencore now, it does not have any cobalt in it. It's actually quite unusual as a copper belt sediment-hosted style deposit that it does not have cobalt in it. So it was curious that in 2015, Ivanhoe sold the Syerston nickel cobalt scandium project to cleantech, which was a related company in that Robert Friedland was also a significant shareholder of that, for a royalty and a small amount of cash and stock. But the way Robert Friedland saw it at the time, it was a scandium story, and he's been promoting the scandium aspect. But it was when he realized that he was too successful at promoting the scandium story and had a market cap far in excess of what the feasibility study suggested that the initial production scale for the scandium would be worth, his green metals and narrative, he was able to switch it to include the nickel cobalt. And so that is a much bigger scale story. And he has kind of sidelined the scandium component, because in the nickel cobalt resource, the scandium grade is quite low. the scandium-enriched portion is actually a ring around the nickel-cobalt resource, when was originally used as a marker to limit the economic grade of the nickel-cobalt resource. But Robert is a visionary who understands that lightweighting of aluminum, for which scandium is fabulously suited, is going to be a part of his green metal future. It's just not going to be now. And one of the problems they encountered was that it's kind of a complex situation to develop an offtake market. They did get Airbus to make a go for it, Robert, backslapping type comments a couple of years ago, but they have not been able to translate any of their offtake negotiations into concrete offtake deals. And this has also been a problem for Scandium International, because the market is reluctant to give $100 million to a company which is going to produce a metal which the volume is going to be 4 times what current supply is. Now, Scandium being part of Robert Friedland's narrative, having cleantech listed on the TSX, is going to make that story more available to North American institutions. And when they go through the 43101 technical reports and start to understand what this is all about, they'll have a basis to compare the Scandium International 43101 report, and they'll realize this is going to be a better interim alternative to cleantech if you want exposure to the Scandium lightweighting story. Now, Scandium International itself put out a news release this week, which was a very dry news release, but it was actually very significant because it underlined what's all involved in developing an offtake market for a metal that is well understood to have properties that are fabulous for aluminum, but which has never been commercialized because all past supply has always been a byproduct of uranium mines, rare earth mines, and titanium dioxide waste stripping. They announced that they had converted their deal with Alcerico for about 20-25% of their proposed production from one of providing scandium oxide powder to providing 2% master aluminum scandium alloy. And this is a really important development because Alcerico is an Ontario-based outfit that's run by people who used to be part of Alcan, who are very much connected with aluminum users. They focus on making specialized products, and by not having to worry about making the master alloy out of the powder, they simply buy the master alloy, remelt it, and blend it with aluminum and other metals to create the custom products that their end users require. And it was in March of last year that Scandium International announced that it had done a deal with an Australian aluminum waste recycler to use their facility to set up master aluminum scandium alloy production. And they were able to do this because they could demonstrate to this Australian company that we have the technology, the skills to do this properly. And since then, they have beefed up their team of metallurgists and others in this area and have been experimenting, making various grades of derivative products of the master aluminum alloy, showing it to customers. And one of the little tidbits in this news release was that they've been able to demonstrate that scandium as low as 0.1% in aluminum starts to make a difference, and at 0.35%, it makes a huge difference. Dramatic, they called it. And that's important because the Russians, when they did everything with aluminum scandium, they always used kind of 1% as what was needed to make the aluminum strong. And at 1%, $2,000 a kilo, a lot of these lightweighting applications just don't make economic sense. But if you're able to achieve the same functionality at 0.35%, that's like reducing the cost from $2,000 per kilo to to $700 per kilo. So for the past 3 months, while everybody wondered what's going on with Scandium International as it slid from 40 cents down to as low as 22 cents, management has been working with all kinds of parties around the world, showing them what can be done with these alloys. In particular, they're focused on the Series 5 alloy, which involves magnesium. This is the particular niche within the aluminum alloy series that Scandium does real wonders for. And the hope now is that with the revised Alcerico deal, which is also extended from 2017 to 2020, and with all these other irons in the fire that they have, that they will be able to announce an offtake agreement sometime in the next little while, which then hopefully becomes the basis for the Evanson family, which now owns just under 20% of the company, kick in with their financing background and help the company raise that $100 million. Now, the clean tech listing on the TSX, in addition to giving a higher profile in North America to Scandium, also makes it easier for a future potential takeout of Scandium International by Cleantech. It's not going to happen tomorrow or even next month because the relative valuation is considerably lower. But what Scandium International is doing is all the heavy lifting that Cleantech does not have the time to do right now, because their goal is to build a nickel cobalt sulfate mine with future scandium production, possibly as a byproduct from the main operation, most certainly as a separate standalone of the scandium enriched ore. Down the road, absorbing a company like Scandium International, which has developed the offtake market, built the Ningen project, demonstrated to the end users that yes, we can produce this at a stable price, make money at it, and scale it up to provide you with everything that you need. This is what the future is for the scandium aluminum lightweighting market. And so, yes, the Cleantech listing is going to be helpful to put a bigger spotlight on Scandium International, especially for institutions that might want an insurance policy against the magnesium ion battery Death Star showing up sooner than anybody would expect. So, good news, and I expect Scandium International to hopefully get a bigger profile than it's had in the past 3 months since they wrapped up 100% of the Ningen project.
No one expects those Death Stars.
Nobody expects them, nope, but one sees hints of them. And for miners and end users, one starts to plan well ahead of the actuality.
Coming up, John Kaiser's closing comments on Discovery Watch.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. A work program is planned for our Finland property that contains diamond-bearing kimberlite. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ADD, and the Frankfurt Exchange, symbol 82A1. Please visit our website at arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, Novo Resources recovered this week after spending a couple of weeks in the dumpster. Are there any new developments?
The only published development is that the company has been granted the license for its Comet Well application. And this is to the southwest of the Purdy's Reward project, which is now 50-50 with Artemis. Novo announced that it has vested. And there they've got about 1,000 meters of the gold-bearing conglomerate unit exposed, and probably another 2 or 3 kilometers undercover, which they can chase. But on the Comet Well ground, and this is what I visited in early August, we've got about 7 kilometers of daylighting edge of this gold-bearing bed. So the granting of this license, which there's been a lot of concern that the Norluma Aboriginal group was being difficult in terms of granting heritage clearances, and Novo did promise to give them 100,000 shares, which at the time was worth about $700,000-800,000, and then when the company put out that November 24th news, dropped to being worth only $400,000. That seemed to have helped speed up things. Now, the things that were negative about the November 24th news was, one, the acknowledgement that the fine gold that they had seen and even panned was coming from a fairly small halo of a couple of millimeters surrounding the gold nuggets, which meant that there was no chance of using small diameter core assays for gold to delineate the gold-bearing portion of these beds. It meant bulk sampling was going to be the only method available. And there was also the acknowledgement that the 17.5-inch diameter reverse circulation rig was not producing a reliable sample. And the news didn't really spell it out what was going on, which puzzled the market, but it later came out that the lift of the cuttings, when they were collecting them at the top, they couldn't match them exactly where they came from within the vertical part of the hole. And given the company's realization that the nuggets in general are concentrated in the lower part of the conglomerate bed, it was quite important to be able to know exactly where your chips came from, so that when you process them for gold content, you can say, yes, here, this is the horizon it's coming from. Now, in that news release, Novo also promised that around mid-December, it would provide an update on sort of a 3D model of what's going on. Now, that's quite interesting in light of this realization that the large diameter holes were going to be useless in terms of reporting any grade, that the scout holes themselves, whatever they assay, it's just going to be a random gold spike here or there. It's not going to allow you to put together any sort of estimates about how this stuff grades. So the kind of story we were left with is what Brent Cook has called a piece of rope, which is the daylighting edge of this bed, and they are taking pit samples from that. We should get some results from that, and quite likely we're going to have in this 3D model something show us that maybe a half meter to a meter of the 4 to 15 meter thick bed is gold bearing. What we want to see are good numbers, because if it's a half meter that has all the gold piled up in it, then we have to sort of multiply that by 4 in order to get a 2 meter width of mining. Now, for the part that daylights, you can probably strip mine that, so that's not going to be a big deal. But if you ever want to go down dip and underground, that's going to be a problem. So 1 ounce could be as little as a quarter to half ounce per ton, if indeed that's going to be the grade and not something substantially lower. During the past few weeks, an academic rival of Quentin Henney, Keith Barron of Fruta del Norte fame, spent 2 days on the project, and after he came back, he penned an article in which he argued that the development of this is going to involve a new paradigm, which bypasses the traditional 43101 resource estimate. In his view, it's going to be impossible to use the current standards to come up with a resource. So this had already been understood after November 24th, because the realization that you can't really measure this, well, then you just start mining it, and you start by trial mining it, and if it works, you keep doing it. And so you could literally mine this piece of rope and just wander down dip until the strip is too high, and then you develop an underground mine, and it would be like one of these vein type mines, which never have more than a 1-year resource ahead of them, but they go on forever, like 100 years. The problem with this scenario is that Novo owns 10,000 square kilometers, most of it down dip and probably at the farthest limit, maybe a couple thousand meters deep. So if it's going to just be a little small scale operation at the daylighting edge of this stuff, all that land is in effect worthless, and the upside that the WITS 2.0 hypothesis was dreaming about, it pretty much vanishes. Now, the promise of a 3D model is interesting because if all they have are these scout hole assays, which are not going to have reliable gold content, what could Novo possibly tell us based on the edge of the bed, sort of 0.5 to 1 meter basal thickness that runs gold, 1 ounce here, 2 ounce there, 3 ounce here, 0.5 ounce over here? How do you extrapolate whatever grade you get from the daylighting edge of the bed down dip? And this is something that really intrigues me. And one speculation I have is that they may end up coming up with a method to have another element as a marker element. And this is where the science controversy becomes interesting. Now, Keith Barron, his own view of the WITS 1.0 formation is very different from Quinton's. It is certainly not a biogenic precipitation theory or source in his mind. And in the latest presentations that Novo has published, it almost seems as if Novo had backed off from the precipitation theory. You saw all this stuff about regression and transgression of the sea, marine reworking of the alluvial gold, and then you saw the analogy to the Bering Sea in Alaska, where you have these dredges hoovering up gold nuggets from the ocean floor, and so the analogy with the west coast of Namibia, the Skeleton Coast, where the Orange River's diamonds, marine diamond is going on. These are sort of pinpoint type sources for the alluvial gold, and this idea that maybe there was a precipitation process linked to the emergence of photosynthesizing algae caused gold to drop out over a very large area. This seems to be under siege. But if you look really closely at these presentations, you'll still see in very small font the little label location of biogenic activity. So Quinton Henney has not backed off from his idea that there is something large-scale and disruptive going on between 3.0 and 2.8 billion years ago, which resulted in this extraordinary enrichment of gold content within a fairly narrow time horizon in these conglomeratic units, which in the case of the Pilbara seems to be beneath the Mount Roe basalt. So if this precipitation theory was in fact effective, and the seawater at the time had extraordinarily elevated content of different metals, Hartwig Frimmel suggests that gold was 10,000 times higher in the seawater back then than it is today. And then along come these algae mats, which have never existed before, start creating oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis, and in the shallows of the continental shelf, a tiny fraction of the ocean, it starts converting the various metals into solid form. And so the gold itself, whether the gold has an affinity for itself and grows on an existing grain so that you get nuggets, or if this starts off on the bottom as fairly fine small platelets that then get rolled up by the marine reworking, and it ends up like a dough ball, bits of dough all turned into a larger dough ball. Doesn't really matter. But other elements could have also dropped out that may have just done it in a very fine manner. For example, osmium or iridium, which people may be familiar with the meteor impact story 65 million years ago, what supposedly killed the dinosaurs in the Yucatan Peninsula. This created in a very thin layer of elevated iridium around the world. It was a disruptive event. Now, the emergence of these algae mats, so the first form of photosynthetic life, was a disruptive event. So it's possible that other metals, along with gold, dropped out of solution during the early days of these algae mats, and it's possible that if Novo is assaying for other elements, it may be able to establish a correlation between gold content and the presence of these more finely distributed elements. And the work they're doing now in the daylighting portion, they would be able to establish, okay, here's where we're getting the gold. It's in this particular layer, and there is a clearly relatively enriched presence of other elements which we have now identified. Then we go back to those scout holes that step down 200, 400,000 meters and even more, and where we see these elevated other elements, and I'm just using iridium and osmium as examples. I don't really know what it's going to be. They could then make a case that here we have delineated tonnage of this thickness over this area. It has the correlation with the target, the marker element. We know this stuff, once it's there, runs a certain level of grade. So here we need $20, $30 million to drive a ramp down to it and start proper bulk sampling or sink a shaft. So this could become the way to go beyond just mining a piece of rope at the exposed edge of it, wander down dip, even step down dip, 10 kilometers and start doing this. This is the science portion of it. It does require the biogenic component to be correct, so that such a correlation can exist on such a large scale. I'm not sure if they are going to tell us anything about this, but I'm sure they're going to be looking at all these angles, and there's going to be a lot of close scrutiny of this news release that comes out if he shows us a three-dimensional picture of this and what his case is for arguing that what they see at the daylighting portion can be extrapolated anywhere beyond that daylighting portion.
John, thanks for the report and best of the season.
Same to you, Jim. Thank you.
We've been talking with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.